He must have had a lot
Welcome
of
to Judicial Dollars and Cents, brought to you by Anders Virtual CFO Services team from all across the United States. I'm John Scott, and in each episode, we'll shine a light on the financial side of the legal world, turning law firm numbers into impact-driven stories. From taxes and profitability to practice growth and leadership, we sit down with law firm innovators who are shaping the future of the profession. Let's dive in, right here on Judicial Dollars and Cents. Hey, and welcome back to Judicial Dollars and Cents, where the business of law meets the practice of law. I'm John Scott with Anders Virtual CFO Services for law firms. And each week we sit down with successful attorneys, legal innovators, and business leaders to explore what it really takes to build a thriving law firm. We go beyond the courtroom to discuss leadership, profitability, operations, marketing, technology, AI, and strategies that help firms grow, scale, and create lasting value. Whether you're a managing partner, an emerging firm leader, or simply passionate about the future of the legal profession, our goal is to provide practical insights you can put to work immediately. Today, we are honored to welcome Charlie Inch. Charlie is the founder and visionary behind Inch Law PLLC in Richmond, Virginia. His firm is rethinking what it means to practice law, which is much like what the VCFO practice at Anders is. We want to be a futuristic accountant and not historical. Charlie's built his practice around a different philosophy, helping clients prevent legal crises before they happen through proactive legal planning, trauma-conscious advocacy, and practical legal education. Charlie's journey to this philosophy is deeply personal, and we're going to get into that here in a little bit. Charlie, welcome to the show.
man. John, it's a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate the invite, and I've checked out some of your episodes, and they're pretty cool. So I'm just happy to
Well,
I'm happy to
thank
be
you.
part of that. Yeah, man.
And you have a unique background and a unique approach to law. There are other trauma-based attorneys that I'm aware of, but tell me about your origin story. How did you become a lawyer, and what brought you to this point today?
Okay. Well, uh, try to skip across the mountaintops to make the story make any sense. I mean, I was not destined to be a lawyer, nor was I supposed to be. It's interesting. A lot of people I talk to, they talk about like wanting to be one from a very early age. I mean, I grew up in South Central Pennsylvania in like the Bible Belt in a cornfield, and sledding down the hill and dropping down so we didn't garrote ourselves with the electric fence that helped the cows at bay. Um, Turnkey engines. My dad had a '69 International Scout. We had a '69 Nova. And my father came from the wilderness, like Appalachia, and his father was a sawmiller. And so I grew up in a place where you fixed everything yourself. I mean, we paint like I can paint, I can chip, I can do contract work. I laid by hand my paver patio out back. So I'm an Eagle Scout. His like rule, like with us the three boys, we had to all get Eagle Scout to get our driver's license. And mom made us sing, play piano, and we had to choose another instrument. That's saxophone for me. I sang on the stage of Carnegie Hall with a choral group. I sang for 9 seasons in the Richmond Symphony Chorus. I had an opportunity to go to the Houston Grand Opera instead of going to law school. And so I kind of came about this in a really weird way that is a story in and of itself. The reason I say that is because I always just made the best decision that was in front of me. So I went to computer science with a focus in software engineering from high school. And I just happened to be short with last name Inch and had a lot of trials and tribulations myself. But I tell you what, it's like I feel like I'm Johnny Cash as a boy named Sue. The gravel in your gut and the spit in your eye is like I'm the son of a bitch that made you sue, right? And you fell into the mud and the blood and the beer. So my mouth and my mind were always good, and calculus is when I started getting straight A's in math because it made sense to me. The one I recall, they're like, how can you calculate how much work it takes to pour a bucket of water? You dy dx and so
Yep.
like when I was just like when I heard that, that's a lot of stuff started making sense. And so computer science was great, except for the fact that it was computers. I freaking hated it. But I knew it was going to be valuable. I just didn't know how. And I showed up around the time of object-oriented programming, which is like, how do you create an object that encompasses, and now I look at it as Pareto's principle. What's the 20% that gives you 80% of the effectiveness? And then you fill in the nodes. That's kind of how I think about stuff, right? And so that's kind of what landed me here. And then I graduated from law school in '07 and '08 when the economy was taking a dump. And my computer science degree did not allow me to take the patent bar, which was the whole reason I justified going to law school in the first place. So that's I'm not sure if that answers the question, but that's how I arrived here, you know?
No, I
And
think it gives me part of the answer I'm getting to, but we'll ferret out the rest of it. And I love the fact that you were an Eagle Scout. Did you get a chance to go on any high adventure trips like Philmont or Boundary Waters?
we did actually did Goshen in Virginia, which was a high adventure. And I went to Halliburton in Ontario, which was on a lake. And so it's
Yeah.
like you had to actually lake there. You know, you had to dig your own latrine each day. Funny story, don't put logs across, and if you do, make sure they're not rotten in case you dig the hole too wide for what they call the kaibo. It was like a 50-gallon drum cut in half with a toilet seat on top. Yeah, interesting things.
You might fall in the poo.
Yeah, it wasn't me, but someone it made the weight rating for the log was not pre-checked. I'll tell you that.
No, I was in Scouts as well. I didn't make Eagle Scout, but of my 3 boys that were all in Scouts, we got to go to Boundary Waters or Philmont, but and only one of them was an Eagle Scout. But it did pay off when he got in a little Piccadilly later in life when he was with someone who was with someone that wasn't doing something right. And the lawyer said, "Give me something to tell the judge." And he said, "Well, I'm an Eagle Scout." And
I'm an Eagle Scout.
It went away. Excuse me. You often talk about wanting the law to become the source of protection and peace of mind instead of simply conflict resolution. What does that vision look like?
So source of protection and peace of mind versus what was the other part of it?
Source of protection and prevention.
Prevention.
So in other words, your approach to law is more preventative in nature than it is fixing a problem.
Here is the foundation of that problem is essentially comes down to this. I think you need to call a lawyer. What happens?
Before you do something.
Well, but I mean, if you hear the phrase, I think you need to call, you're going to need to call a lawyer. You're going to need a lawyer. It's like that fear, right? It's that consequence. It's like, oh shit. And so I think we've gotten to this point in time where, I think of like law is now inter-family conflict and interpersonal conflict because you can't fight it out anymore. You can't punch someone and take the bicycle back. And so law is now where the actual conflict between families and property and things like that now happen. So I really start to now elevate that and start asking, if we're talking about that, anyone who's gone through divorce, if I say, hey, a divorce is just legal warfare. And the question is, how many coffers are you going to fill of other people to come in? And so lawyers, to a certain extent, when you talk about what's traditional legal turned into, when you're talking criminal and domestic and kind of stuff that individuals need, and I was kind of mentioning it when we were talking beforehand, is that they're like at the Industrial Revolution era or whatever, the profession fractured. You now had therapists, you now have psychiatrists, you've got psychologists, you have consultants, coaches, advisors. All of that came from the corpus that used to be lawyer. And when you think about like early professions and what do they provide for people in the community, and I guess the problem that has happened is now everything is so siloed. You go to a therapist and say, man, I think you need to talk to a lawyer. Have you talked to a lawyer? I think, and also you might need to talk to an accountant. And so then you talk to the therapist. If they send you to the lawyer sends you to talk to the accountant. And there's no one talking amongst each other to figure out the Gordian knot that's now the complex human life of the 21st century. And looking at it with a perspective of trying to give you the best shot of having the best life possible is, I guess, the concept that we're talking about here. And so if lawyers are only ever the mercenaries, then you're not using them to their fullest capacity, because lawyers have the ability to now, what other profession has the ability to have 100% as close as you can get to it confidence? Can't get that with therapists, can't get that with doctors, there's all mandatory reporters. So the only profession that's now has, first off, something that's truly important for a being to show up, and that's to know that the person is absolutely held to confidence. So that's the one thing, because you can't get a human being in the 21st century. Everyone's too worried about getting canceled, being put in a bad light, and so you don't have this ability to actually have a place where you can be honest. And judgment, blame, and shame are now part of the regular everyday. And that essentially what that did was that taught us that we were going to be exiled from the group. And so now there's very few people that we can talk about those deep problems, and men specifically are lacking this part in our society. And the places that they could go, the society kind of looks down its nose at it. However, we get to this aspect of how can law now become a source of protection and kind of prevention, right? And peace of mind. And that's only if we move upstream. However, the problem is that we run into is the consumer right now is only interested in purchasing at the pain point. Only at the pain point. There's a couple other issues we're running into as well that kind of tie into this. A lot of the industries now are no longer looking, at least saying, what's the fair market value for the product? What's the fair value that I'm getting? They're now saying, what does the market hold? What does the market hold? And in the consumer's mind and a lot of Americans' minds right now, the fact is that they are actually affecting the market. You now have private hedge funds that are buying up private houses, and now there's no longer stock, and so now you are synthetically, because you're now grabbing that up to turn it into investments under hedge funds. Now, someone might ding me and say, hey, Mr. Ince, it's not quite like that. I'm just saying the perceptions, right? So now we've got this aspect that everyone's spending more money than they're making. I keep seeing right now, because of my work, how many people really have $5,000 or $7,500 to actually pay me if they get a felony charge. And you know how easy that is right now? CPS comes and someone says you abused your kids. If you and the wife get into it, she hits you with a protective order. So the pain point needs to be moved up. The problem is it's like people are so scared to call lawyers and they don't know who to call. It's become so confusing. And you don't have a general practitioner like you do in medicine that says, hey man, you really need to see a proctologist. What is that? Or I need you to see an endocrinologist. What's that? Right? I don't know to look for those things. If my liver hurts, I need this. If that hurts, I need that. If I need a lymphologist, I don't know those things. We have in medicine, because medicine's now been kind of designed this way. But now no one is really doing that for the law and the state bars. I know Virginia State Bar. I'm not trying to jump. I don't want any trouble with those guys. However, I would say, what's their answer to legal AI right now? The very people that are supposed to be protecting us and monitoring us have no answer for ChatGPT, Claude, Elon Musk saying, hey, I fired all my lawyers and now I use my AI.
Well, and that brings your pain point. That makes your pain point for the client even worse, because they act on their own using AI to try and figure out the solution, when instead of calling you ahead of time, things have gotten worse.
I think I see that as easier, because now I have a trigger to tell them, if you're asking AI, bring it to me. Fine. You know what? Use it. Because you know what is in this brain? 20 freaking years of dealing with humans and the situation and the systems. I know the power of evidence. I know what is convincing to people. I know what is anathema to them, even though I know you should be not guilty, I don't think I can get past this, right? And how do you explain what reasonable doubt is to a jury? The ChatGPT, I use that shit. I use it, and I think people ought to. And that's the beauty of the AI. The AI makes it so that we can actually do our job better. And I'll tell you what, I want my client to bring ChatGPT to me. The only thing I would say is the problem is now that they can get it, because now they can search it, and because it's not protected. So the only problem with that is if you killed grandmother and you want to know how to hide the body, and you want to know, can pigs really eat? If I watch Snatch and I listen to Bricktop, does that work? Don't ask your ChatGPT that. They can find it. That's your problem with ChatGPT.
Okay, I got a couple of solutions for you. One, and it might not work in your practice because you don't have annuity type clients, although the criminal guys might be annuity type clients. But if
All
you
right.
went to a subscription based fixed fee, they would call you sooner because it's not, oh my God, he's gonna charge me as soon as he picks up the phone. So
Uh-huh.
subscription based fixed fee,
I've
that
already
would
got it.
fix that problem. Good.
I've
I'm glad to
already
hear it.
got it. I'm probably, the problem with it is I don't know that I'm comfortable with what the pricing is. So
Well,
that the concept is
are
life
you
general
charging? Are
counsel.
you tracking your time?
I know what my time is worth. The problem is this. And this is about like how you build a 21st century law firm. Now this kind of segues into that. Do we want to make a note? Let's make a note. What were we talking about? How does that go back into what were life general counsel? Okay, LGC. Okay, do you want to talk about like how I'm building my law firm differently? Because then
Yeah.
that goes back to the problem that this reveals, right? So what's your like what do you want to talk about inch law?
Well, if you're doing this where you're general counsel for your clients on a fixed fee basis, I think that is futuristic. And I think more firms to do that because in reality, clients want to know, what am I going to pay to have on staff an advisor? Okay. They're not worried about calling you with every little thing that the clock's going to start running because they know it's a fixed fee. Now, I'm sure
Right.
you have some outs if you've got to go to a trial and it's, a murder trial and it's going to be months long, then I'm sure the clock starts. But for the most part, if I pay you X amount per month or per week, whatever it is, inch law, if
When
I
you don't
hold
know
up,
who to call inch law. Go ahead.
if I hold up my end of the bargain, I've got an advisor, a consigliere that will always be there to help me out. The other thing I think that needs to happen within the professions is that we need to collaborate more in the best interest of the client. So the accountant, the attorney, and the doctor, with permission from the client, there needs to be a quarterback. I don't care who it is, but everybody needs to be on the same page in serving the interests of the client.
Okay. Do you want the fire hose or do you want me to like spray you with a really powerful blast? How do you want
No,
it?
give me the fire hose.
Okay. Inch law is inside of a 4,000 square foot space on the third story of a historic building, 1 block from Capitol Hill in Richmond, Virginia, between 10th and 12th, on the same block as Bank of America. Third story, 4,000 square feet. That space is called Holistic Life Studios. I'm the founder and visionary of that. Inch law essentially is a anchor tenant. Red Quill is another anchor tenant for business law. We're bringing in psych nurse practitioner practice group that's going to use it, and it essentially is Holistic Life Studios, that is an integral community to create a livelihood built on law, business, and wellness. It has a somatic room with a massage table so that we can bring in neurosomatic massage, craniosacro, Reiki, Rolfing, because what's going on is I watch a human being watch their kids get taken from them.
Mm.
People don't get that. People don't conceptualize. I walked into a jail to talk to an old man in a wheelchair about whether or not the allegations of underage object sexual penetration had any merit. Like those conversations are insane, and no one prepares you for it out of law school. No one, and there's no protection to make sure that you are. So, like, I started doing criminal defense as court appointed counsel in 2008, and so I was a solo practitioner with no help except for a little bit of phone service for about a decade. So I did everything. So now when I went to Cartagena, that's when I had healed. So there's a thing called litigation stress. I'm building something to fix that. Gail Fiore of the Winning Focus is collaborating with me. She's got an answer to litigation stress for lawyers with burnout and clients that you can't control because they are irrational. Get to me. That's the Holistic Law Studios. That's where law and heat and wellness connect in my little Baromean ring. Law, business, wellness. And then Holistic Life Studios has then a virtual kind of overlay that I call the tavern, because the downtown spot's a little people don't like to get to it, but the tavern then, just like you're talking about, is now bringing in the people that can do the thing. So Gail that can do that. The other mental health clients that I have that can help the clients that need that, right? So I have that in the Holistic Life Studios, and now I want to create that for some place that lawyers can now call Holistic Law Studios and say, I've got a client that I think has litigation stress. What can I do? The other thing that we can do is, I don't know if anyone knows, but we were getting ready to have a law crisis, a lawyer crisis. And that's going to be really bad because then it's going to tip over and say, then let's use the AI. But we are losing 25% of our lawyers within 4 years of practice, and we're losing another 25 within 10, never to return. The other thing is the ability to resurrect lawyers that are suspended or otherwise in ignominy. So it doesn't mean you necessarily need to get back, but I'm building a concept of like the Lincoln lawyer, kind of like Pony Express law. Inch law becomes the foundation because now we have 21st century. I now have the virtual nexus. I now have the CRMs that I have now built out. I now have all of the admin. I now have a CFO because it's now finance department, operations, sales, and marketing, and then I have an integration department. So the integration is the triquetra of the Borromean rings with a circle, right? And so that's the integration, where all the places where operations of law intersects with sales and finance, and then where those finance and sales, like that's the integration. And then instead of having HR, which no one likes because that's like nothing about HR is good, I called HR. Uh-oh, to shut the fuck up, right? And so uh, I don't want that. Like, and I don't, and IT, like no one wants to talk to IT. So I have what I call integration and kind of what I call virtual infrastructure. And I also think of that as business artifact preservation. Like make sure we have the ability to be an entity. So that means like pay attention to the stuff that makes us have to be alive as a business. But this all gets back to what we were talking about, I think, which was the Life General Counsel, right? So now I have this concept in all of this thing that I call entrepreneur speakeasy. How do you go from a time hustler to a main hustler, right? Because I was a time hustler before. I didn't realize that I thought I owned a business. The business owned me, right? Right? Why? Because no one did shit unless Charlie did the shit. That's not a business. Oh my God. It doesn't work unless it works together. And so there's a huge fear point. I could help if you are a solo practitioner and you want, I'm going to break $1 million this year in less than 24 months. I went from
That's
150 to 200 that I could do all like with these two hands, right? And of course, not knowing where anything was, like my trust account was good, but clearly, like my letters probably weren't where they needed to be. There's a lot of stuff that was in disarray because what happens is you start cutting the corners, right? You know what you can do, and you know how you can kind of not get in trouble, and you're not going to have any problem. But the moment it's like you have 400 pounds of groceries in a grocery cart, how small does that pebble need to be before the whole cart stops? You ever have that happen to you? Like, and like literally, how
Oh yeah.
far then do you need to back the cart up and to get around this teeny tiny little pebble? But like COVID hit, and that sent ripples of consequence because 63 days of no income. Then, but that also gave me, I had been working on my personal healing journey, right? Because you can only deal with like everyone's worst day as your every day for so long before it's like it's every day. You're like the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And I'm a bachelor. Now I'm 44, but back then I was in my 20s and 30s. No preparation for handling the heaviness, you know. And so what I've tried to do now is I've kind of, in my mind, made it through. My big turning point was watching the Vegas shooting unfold on television, and I realized that an aspect of me made sense. Like a
Oh
part of me,
wow.
and a part of me was like, you know what? I kind of get that. It's wrong, man, that's part of that. And so I didn't even realize it happened. I mean, I was mortified the fact that it had happened. And also keep in mind, I've also at this point in time spent 10 years when I saw that happen. I was thinking it was 2017. So I'd spent 9 to 10 years of literally doing murder, like the worst, like, you know, I did that for defense work. And so you hear the stories and how it happens, right? And then you hear from the parents, and you hear from the victim's parents, and you hear from the cousin, and you hear from the brother and the sibling, and you hear from the grandmother, and those people are coming into your office weeping. And when they know that the society is not, I had a client accused of um transporting drugs into a facility. Okay, I don't want to get into any of the details, um, but it's we didn't know what the drugs were, right? Let's just say it was, and I just used the and the family's talking to me, right? And they've come to me and they're like, oh, they've done nothing ever, right? They're a good person. They're on they're getting disability or something like that. Who knows? All this stuff is hypothetical, right? Because the family loves their kid. And then I was just like, man, I was like, but fentanyl,
Oh,
man, how many people have been dying in the streets of fentanyl, right? And they're like, oh my God, we went to a funeral just the other day. It's like, yeah. I said, I've lost some clients, which I have. I've lost some clients to fentanyl. I was like, and I said, the one thing that really rocked my world one time was a parent called me and said, Mr. Inch, so-and-so is locked up. And I said, okay, I'll do a bond. I'll see if I can get a bond hearing right away. They said, I feel like an awful human being and an awful parent. But can I tell you that last night was the first night I got a night's of damn sleep, because I've been dreaming about the fact that they were going to be overdosed and in a ditch every night for the past 3 years. And they said, I didn't realize how much of a weight that was. And I thought, now they're in jail, they're going to be safe.
so they were
And
conflicted, but they said, please just leave them there.
well, I tell them this story, right? And they're like, oh my God, you're right. And then I said, and now she's the one that might have been whatever, right? Like what the concept, because people lose sight of the person they love, but they lose sight of what the consequence of whether that decision was intentional or not, right? Because they were able to immediately, and that's kind of what it's a more human law. What we have to understand is that the emotional state of the human being in front of us is determining how much of the information they can actually conceptualize. And I've got a philosophy I call integral person theory, but it kind of uses this Borromean ring of physiology, cognitive, and emotional. And then above that is kind of this conscious me, whatever the actual me is. And so it's a way that I can start conceptualizing with the clients, because what's going on is our vagus nerve, when you go to fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, the ventral vagal on top of the parasympathetic nervous system essentially shuts down if you follow polyvagal theory. So you have a shutdown, and now that affects your cranial nerve roots, which explains when you have a really high, tense, difficult hearing, the client walks out in the hallway and says, Mr. Inch, what did they say in there? I didn't hear a single thing. And the lawyer's usually ticked off. This is the most important day of our life. And now you're going to blame me? And you weren't even paying attention, right? And you just explode. But now, if you follow these new ways of thinking about how the vagus nerve works, now it explains it, because now the tenor tympani muscle is relaxing, which detunes the eardrums from high and mid low. And now they're only hearing low voices. And guess what? If you talk to EMTs and first responders, what do they tell newbies? Talk in a low voice because they're in shock and they can't hear regular voices. They know it. They've already applied. Why doesn't the law know that? And this is called litigation stress. I have an answer for it. It's called litigation stress management. I've worked on it with Gail Fiore, and it's ready to launch. If you want help, like I'm here to help the lawyers. I'm tired of my colleagues killing themselves. I've gone to too many funerals, and there's too many families that I now personally know that something bad has happened, and it's because of the level of difficulty of this work. And everyone just expects us to do more, and that we're not caring enough. And I agree with the second part. People don't, but the thing is, though, is we've been taught to do it that way. You got to kind of not care, right? That's what they kind of teach you. But the problem is that no one can listen to difficult opinions unless they know you care. Unless that's the
Well, and you're so
number
right.
one thing.
If you look out at, there are AA groups that just cater to attorneys, because it is a very stressful profession. Hey, we could talk about this all for 2 more hours, but I want to move on just a little bit.
Yeah.
What's the last book that you read that you enjoyed? You and I read all day long, not for enjoyment, but what's the last book you read for enjoyment?
The last book I read just for enjoyment, man, I'm looking at a bookshelf right now. I tried to read Atlas Shrugged for enjoyment. That it didn't finish that one. The one I read for enjoyment was Doris Kearns Goodwin's Lincoln, A Team of Rivals, Lincoln's Political Genius. That one, I didn't realize I needed to listen to it, and I listened to it just because I just love the concept of that president. And so like I like to try to get close to the horse's mouth, so to speak. But man, that was a good one. I listened to it on Audible. It's 29 hours, and that was a good time of my life. It's 2021. It was that summer. I went to the Berkshires for a wedding, and so it was like the full thing. But that's part of what reading. Anyone that wants to change their life right now that's stuck in the front lines or whatever's going on, take 25 minutes a day. It's a Pomodoro, and get yourself an Audible book or something like that on your phone. Set it beside something else you use. Stack the habit. So if you always go to listen to the music, set it beside that, and then go in, get 5 books, a couple different emotional levels for whatever your future you needs to know. And then just commit to listen to one of those just one time on your commute at some point in time when you otherwise would be listening to music or something else. That's my advice on
That's
that one.
great advice. And I do like the book on Lincoln. I haven't read that book, but I did hear recently that Lincoln picked a rival to help him out in his cabinet, and the rival was reluctant to do it. But Lincoln had the foresight to know that I need people of opposing opinions. And my hope is for this country that at some point we get leaders that can work together again so that we can move forward.
Oh man, 100%. Yep. The cool thing was he got people from the opposition, not just rivals. Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, yeah, and it's just a unique thought. I mean, if somebody tried that today, his own party or their own party would revolt. So before we wrap up, I want to ask you something about Richmond, Virginia. If I was going to travel there, give me a restaurant recommendation that is not touristy and out of the way. What's your favorite place to go that you would recommend?
Do you care about price point?
No.
Portico Bar and Grill out in Glen Allen. My dear friend Paolo Rendazzo owns that. It's set up like a little cottage. It's got outdoor seating. It's got a detached kitchen. He owned Franco's. He owned Sensi. He's like from Sicily. Like that's one of the if you're not coming to Charlie Inch's kitchen, that's the place you go. But if you want to come to Charlie Inch's kitchen for an existential conversation and something, some like pan-seared salmon with a Dijon mustard and dill, aioli, like that's the kind of things, or Bacchus. I love Bacchus on the corner of Main and Meadow. Nancy and Chris own that. They've owned it for I think 30 years, but that's really good, kind of like Americana Italian.
2 great recommendations. I appreciate that. Hey, Charlie, thank you so much. What's the best way for folks to get a hold of you and your firm?
If you want to see everything that I'm doing, inchafoot.com is that's my personal brand, and it's very memorable. My last name is Inch and I'm Afoot, inchafoot.com. My website for my law office is inchlawva.com. And my traumainformedlaw.com page is kind of the beginnings of my thought on what trauma conscious law looks like. And my book is coming out in August or September.
What's the book name?
The working title is not finished out, but it's essentially how to do a neurosomatic reset. So I've developed a way to show the client in the body when their vagus nerve is shutting down, and we can do it in the office in a safe way. So going back to your life general counsel, my ability to show and kind of reveal what's the underlying fear and what it's really actually doing to your ability to make a decision, because it becomes kind of like a black hole. You can't see it. So it's on a neurosomatic reset. I've done like 2,000 of them since October 2023.
Charlie, I love what you're doing with the futuristic firm and your vision. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank all of you, all of our listeners, for tuning in to Judicial Dollars and Cents, where the business of law meets the practice of law. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please like, follow, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Our mission is simple: to help law firm owners build stronger businesses, better serve their clients, and create firms that thrive for generations. Until next time, I'm John Scott with Anders Virtual CFO Services for Law Firms. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us on Judicial Dollars and Cents, presented by Anders Virtual CFO Services. If you found value in today's conversation, be sure to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcast. To learn more about how Anders helps law firms strengthen their financial foundations and drive growth, visit anderscpa.com. Until next time, keep making smart decisions that make perfect sense.